Previously on agentpalmer.com, it's what you learned after you know it all, the Earl Weaver autobiography, an A to Z list of movies I enjoy, and both Neil and I appreciate all of your support from the Anxiety episode. This is the Palmer Files, episode 14, with guest Henno Heitur, a musician, podcaster, and friend. We discuss audio production, learning by doing, recording an album, podcast jingles, and taking the leap from wanting to doing. So, let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 14th episode is Henno Heitur, podcaster, musician, world-class jet skier, and friend. You may have heard him on such shows as The Crazy Life or Moving the Needle, or perhaps even his previous gig co-hosting the long-running Gotham TV show fancast Gotham Lights, which spun into the Orville Lights, both of which are sadly no more. Henno was here to discuss the album he is recording with his band Doghouse, and what you are in for is an episode in two parts. Part 1, where Henno tells me about his past and present in recording and audio engineering, plus what he's learned about the process of recording an album in general, and Part 2, where we discuss what passion projects mean, what it takes to put in the work, and how that makes us fulfilled. Both parts were engaging, educating, and entertaining, and in the end, I hope you find this episode a bit motivating or at least inspiring. What is it you want to do? Think about that as you listen on. So, if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at The Palmer Files, and you can tweet Henno at IdaHenno, that's IDAHENNO. You can hear him on The Crazy Life or Moving the Needle, wherever you are listening to this show. And don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And remember, all of these links and those mentioned in the show will be available in the show notes. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Henno, I want to start off with a small fact about myself. And that is, in high school, when I was just getting ready to start thinking about what I was going to go to college for, there was a very, very, very small window of about 4 months where I was going to go to school for audio engineering. And I feel like my background hanging around in bands and playing in bands and being willing to buy the mixers and stuff and playing with them is what spurred that on, and the realization that I'd never actually make anything of myself as a player.
Yeah.
Because I knew where my skill set ended. But you're not doing it as a profession, but you do it professionally. So where did that start?
I think the introduction, what made me aware of audio recording was with the band that I was in the 90s called Suck, because we had our own recording studio that was built by the bass player, who happens to be an amazing carpenter, and they had like the room and then the glass and the mixing board behind it. And they're using ADATs, which were basically a way of digitally recording onto VHS tapes. The first versions were horrible. They got better. There was digital tape machines going back to the 80s, but this was something that any consumer could have and use.
Okay.
And so that was the first time I was actually around part of a recording process. Prior to that, I had, like, when I learned my first quote unquote band, which was basically my guitar teacher saying you should hang out and play with the drummer that works in shipping and handling here at the music store. We used to go into the music store after hours when it was closed. So we'd mess around with recording equipment and record things and throw mics up and stuff like that. But there was nothing to it. Like, there was no interest in it. It didn't do anything for me at all. But with Suck was the first time that I actually recorded. We recorded an EP. We were sending out tapes for label interest and that kind of thing. And it was the first time I'd actually been part of the process from beginning to end. And even though it still was just this giant thing with a bunch of knobs and buttons on it that I didn't quite understand, it was enough to when I was no longer in that band and decided I wanted to do my own thing, getting a 4-track, a drum machine, all those things, the minor things like a little reverb unit. None of that was scary to me. It was fun. It was enjoyable. And I started recording my own songs and programming drums and that kind of thing.
Now, being a part of the process is one thing. Were you interested and aware of the process as far as the bands you were looking up to?
Not at all. That's the thing. Eddie, who is our drummer, he's a phenomenal musician. He and songwriter, plays guitar and sings and plays drums. And he was the guy that was really everyone was into music.
Sure.
And a variety of music, but Eddie was the one that seemed to really key in on elements of it. And I never did. I didn't listen with any sort of a critical ear. Nothing wowed me as far as how something was done, the production value. I never had that. It never even entered my brain until I started recording my own music. And I would say Suck existed from about 95 to 97-ish. And then for a couple of years, like I said, I messed around with a 4-track tape player. And it was about 99, 2000 when I got my first computer and started doing computer recording. It was at that time that I started to dive into the rabbit hole of what was possible. And it was at that point that I started to listen to music differently.
I presume it's kind of like when you work with graphic designers long enough, you never see the world the same way ever again.
Exactly.
One project is all it takes, and they can be like, oh, well, the kerning's a little bit off, and the leading is a little weird, and those colors aren't quite complementary like they should. And then all of a sudden, you're looking around, maybe in a magazine, there's like a mistake, and you notice it, and you can't go back. You can never go back. There's at least 2 graphic designers in my life that I'm always like, fuck you. I was happy in my ignorance.
Well, I have done this to people. I have cursed them with hearing music no longer in an enjoyable fashion by pointing certain things out.
That's
some people appreciate it. Others go, damn you. Sure. Why did you have to make me aware of this? Because now I can't unhear it.
So when you were toying around on your own, was it to get the ideas out, or was it to experiment with what this technology does? Like you said you had a 4-track. So was it moving stuff? I mean, what I remember of the 4-track was first how to use it. And I had one of those Tascam Porta Studios where it was like, all right, I can record an unlimited amount of tracks, but the only way to do that is to finalize 4 of the tracks and move 3 of them to track 1. And then I can overdub 2, 3, and 4. And then if I want to do anything further, I got to move them over and keep, ad nauseum. And it was like, I almost had to just lay down like stupid riffs and stuff just to learn how to use the technology. And for me, that was almost better than like everything else, like just the understanding. But it was such a, it was probably around the same era as you, is like the late 90s, mid to late 90s. And it was just kind of learned by doing. Was that your experience?
Yeah, it was getting in and experimenting. At the time, the internet wasn't quite the resource as it is today. So it was more about getting a couple of books maybe.
Sure.
Or just reading manuals. A lot of it I understood already in a general way, like you're talking about bouncing tracks over to make space to record new ones. Those are all the things that I can't recall exactly how I learned them, but it wasn't like the last 10 years of my life with recording music. And it also wasn't about, because I had never really been in a professional studio, this was, what John had built was basically just for us to write music and have fun. And it was something that was enjoyable. It didn't have that idea like, oh, this is a potential vocation.
Okay.
I never had that outlook on it ever. I never even considered it. I don't know why, but I think it just comes down to, again, like now I listen to podcasts on music production where the people are roughly my age. And so they're talking about what they were doing when they were doing it. And I can compare it to where I was at that time. And I was like, wow, we literally lived a couple of towns apart. There was I could have been doing exactly what they were doing. There was no reason I couldn't have been. It was just a matter of circumstances and what had been presented. Like I'd never even considered it. It was just for fun.
Yeah. What were the bands early on? Like Suck was what kind of music?
Power pop.
Okay.
The last 10 years is the most music I've done on a consistent basis when I left California, because after Suck, like I said, I did my own thing for a while. I started a band with that same drummer that I played with when I was 17 years old. We started a band called Whistle Bit. We recorded our own music. I have some demos of that. Like I made an album of stuff that I recorded at my house. I would still play with Eddie, who is that, now he was playing guitar, and we would play live together. And then when that fell apart, I got into doing jet skiing, and I did the jet skiing for I actually competed, went to the world finals, all that kind of stuff. And I did that pretty much until 2006 or so. And then that's when I moved to Idaho. And when I moved to Idaho, I had sold pretty much everything except some PA gear and guitars. Like all my amps, anything that I just had still, I got rid of. And when I came here, it was like everybody was a freaking guitar player. I was not looking forward to starting to do music here at all. And then a friend told me that her sister was a singer. And at that time, I started playing just in the living room with a guy that I met. He was super into jam bands, and I wasn't. But it was really fun to learn something new. And we were just playing covers. It was a good opportunity for me to look at creativity within playing other people's music, because I was very much against it, because that's kind of one of the reasons our band fell apart, was because of cover bands. The main thing was I'm going to let go of all the things that held me back as a musician early on, and the attitudes and the ego and all this stuff and the judgments and that. And so when we had this opportunity to play with my friend Haley's sister, here comes Danae. She's very standoffish, non-committal, and she walks in and we start playing a funky version of Come Together by the Beatles. When we get to the part where it says, one thing I can tell you is you got to be free. She just goes up to this other range, and I literally stopped playing and just started laughing because it was so unbelievably amazing.
And unexpected too, right? Like it's out of left field. You're not even expecting it.
No, she was singing I'd never heard her sing ever. I'd heard a little bit of her history, and she's singing softcore, great voice, sings like spot on key. You can tell that she knows what she's doing. And then all of a sudden this sound comes out. And I don't think my friend Margot was the only singer I'd ever been around. And we recorded some music together who, to me, it was like a painter with a paint palette, like, okay, what colors do you want? So I'd been around people that could really, like someone that could really sing, but it was something different about it, that it was happening. We had just had headphones on playing in this living room. Then the next time we get together, she has a binder and all the songs are in the binder, totally organized. And she has pages and pages of lyrics, and she wrote lyrics. Like some people write poetry, she wrote lyrics.
Okay. She
put her thoughts down in a lyrical form, meaning that in her head, she heard either a rhythm or a melody or something. So all I had to do was play some chords. It was all there already. If she didn't have a melody, we could create one, and the timing was there already for songwriting. And that was the beginning of me getting back into music after easily a decade of not really taking it seriously. And we started a band. I started picking up some recording gear because I already was familiar with computer recording. That wasn't scary for me at all. And it was still expensive, but not that expensive.
The price had come down, I would presume, quite a bit since the last time you were looking into this stuff.
And the quality had gone up a lot. And now we have the vast resources known as the internet.
Sure.
And there were lots of online groups and places where you could get information, and everyone had chat rooms. And I started doing the deep dive into recording and trying to learn as much as I could, because that's how I am. That the asset that can become a liability is that I get more locked up into the research than I am into the doing.
Okay. I want to,
right?
the understanding is it starts to overtake anything else.
And it's very common with artists. I talk to artists over and over again. It doesn't pick your type of art. And somebody has gone down this path, and over and over and over again, you'll see somebody post on some message board about this mic, that mic, blah, blah, blah. And somebody will always say, fucking walk away from your goddamn computer and just make some music. And who the fuck cares? I read it all the time, and I will hear that with any kind of arts, visual arts, photography, blah, 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 because it's easy now to just get lost in, do I suck or does my gear suck? Is there a magic button that can make me better? And the reality is you just have to get out there and go for it and do it. And yeah, sometimes gear helps.
Let me ask, because process is important though. I remember that while we didn't have any idea what we were doing, we were basically fumbling in the dark without a flashlight. And I'm sure it could have sounded better, but we were kind of fumbling around. Like, there is something to the knowledge of like where you place the mics. And we were just doing this in a basement,
Yeah.
So how much of that do you now know? Are you covered? Is there still more for you to dive into? Like, as far as that goes, or has what you've learned already melded with the experience you've got where like you can look at a room, you can figure out your mic placement, and you're pretty solid on where things should go? And whether it's learned or innate, I'm not asking that question, but you're there, right? Like, you've done enough, you've read enough.
So right now I'm in the process of recording an album with one of the bands I play in. And I was playing in 2 bands last year. I started playing bass. My main instrument is guitar. I've been a guitar player my whole life. I've learned enough about bass playing to play bass on my own music. And bass players are unicorns where I live. So if you play bass, you can get into a band. It's easy. Like I said, there's a million guitar players. The band Doghouse that I'm playing and recording with now, we all write music. Everybody in the band writes. And we had enough music to record an album. I had decided to take the winter off, not ski, and take an opportunity to focus on doing this album. And I have brought all of this knowledge. And the great news is I'm finally getting the results that I've wanted, because so I built my own studio. I had a loft apartment that was in a commercial area, so I had a garage below, and I took half the garage and I built a studio. And I built it legit with the double walls, all the soundproofing, and then I did all my inside stuff. And I learned, what not to do, what to do, what's worth it, what's not worth it. And in the meantime, you hear an album that was released that somebody had recorded, in their basement with no audio treatments whatsoever on the cheapest equipment ever, and it's a massive hit. Right?
Yeah.
And it's that thing it comes back to, which is a great performance is a great performance. It doesn't matter what it's recorded on. Something can be really bad, but like a lot of hits that we hear, oftentimes the vocal is the original vocal that was done on a demo. And because of the urgency of the artist getting their thoughts down, they could never duplicate it again. They could go into the most professional studio ever with the best sound and the best equipment ever, and they could not match that original recording on a handheld recorder or something. And so they make it happen, right? And this is that thing, that interesting paradox of you can go down this massive rabbit hole and this person can do this thing, with the least amount of stuff, the least amount of money, and it's great. But bringing this back around, Doghouse wanted to record. We have a couple studios in the area, but I want to do this. I want to record the band. It's going to save us a ton of money. It's something I want to do. I don't have a studio anymore. I have all of the audio treatments are basically where I'm sitting right now doing, talking to you. I have them all around the room around me. My space is basically what would be considered like a mixing room. Okay. Where I've set this place up for mixing. I can record in here too, but a car goes by, you're going to hear the car go by. It's my house, Yeah. But I've learned, big deal. I don't care about that anymore. I'm into, doing, everything that I was doing prior to this band. I do podcast intros and outros and songs and, on your podcast.
Absolutely.
That's me.
Yeah.
By the way,
Yes.
the outro piece that I told you that was probably going to get developed into a song is going to be on the Doghouse album.
That's fantastic.
And it's amazing. And here's the scary part. We started recording last Saturday. We're still rewriting that thing right now. We had 1 week, 2 Thursdays, 2 Saturdays, because once the drums are set up with the microphones on them, we can't move them.
Yeah, no, those you got to get it all done.
I mean, we can, but it's going to be slightly different. And so you try to do as much as you can by not messing with the stuff. So the last thing you want to be doing in an ideal world, every great rock and roll album, let's just take Pearl Jam 10 as an example.
Sure.
They spend a month rehearsing for that with a producer.
Yeah, before, because you want to know what you're doing before you hit record, right? I mean, that's the gist of it is whether you're with a producer, whether you're, sequestered off in a cabin somewhere, let's get the chord changes down, let's get the progressions down, let's get the solos down. At a certain point, it's not about money for like, oh, well, we have the studio for however long we want it and we're paying for it. But you want to get it down. You want to be able to turn around after a day, a week, and say like, we did this, we put these down. Maybe there's a couple versions, but that stuff doesn't happen because it's like, hey, Henno, I have an idea for a song. Let's hit record and see what happens. Now, I know that happens sometimes. But that's not the way albums are done.
Well, that's how I learned about recording. Okay. That's when you've got your own recording studio, that's how you do it. And I mean, there's basically 4 ways you can record to simplify it.
What are the 4 ways?
So 1, everyone is in the same room playing live together at the same time.
Okay.
Beatles, right? Abbey Road. All the amps are in the same room. All the drums, everything's in the same room.
Yep.
Frank Sinatra, Beach Boys, you name it, right?
Okay. Yep.
And yes, they used multi-track techniques and all that stuff. However, the basic track was all together in the same room. Guitars are bleeding into drums. Drums are bleeding into guitars. It's a take.
Yep.
You're going for the best take. Option number 2, things are isolated. So the problem with option number 1 is you can't go back and fix one person's mess up because you're all bleeding into each other's microphones. And it's part of the sound, it's part of the energy, but you can't fix it. Option number 2, and now let's go to Springsteen's band. They go into a studio, and this is a great story. They go into the studio to record their famous album, Born in the USA. The drums are in the main room, and there was this technique of recording where you had a dead side of a room and a live side of a room. It goes back to the 70s. And so they had the drums in the dead side of the room, all mic'd up. Everyone's in the room together, but everyone's amplifiers are in little booths around.
Okay, so everybody's hearing you're playing live, but everything's isolated. So if I play one wrong note, we can fix it in post and it's not bleeding.
Yep.
Okay.
The first way, you can combine takes, but it's literally like, okay, at the guitar solo, we're going to switch to take number 6. But you can't go through and just say, we're going to use the verse from here. I mean, you can, but it's a lot harder because you're not playing. You just have too many things mixing together. The tempo could be slightly different, whatever. So this second wave, it's all isolated, so you can go back and replace things if you want to. And one of the fun things about that album, and now you will go back and listen to this.
Is this where you ruin stuff for us, Henno? Is that what's happening?
No, this is actually enjoyable.
Okay,
you'll love this. So Bruce Springsteen comes down, and the mixing engineer's doing an initial mix, and he's got all the drums. Like I said, they're all and Bruce goes, oh, what are these 2 over here? It's like, oh, those are those 2 mics that we stuck on the other side of the room up on the ceiling. And he goes, oh, let me hear those. And the guy pushes him up, and he's like, yeah, that's it right there. And he keeps pushing him up. And then the mixing engineer takes him back down, finishes his mix. Well, Bruce comes down and he sees that those faders are down again. And he's like, pushes those back up and pretty much says, if you touch those faders, you're walking out the door. And that's the sound of that album. The reason the drums are huge is because Bruce was like, I love this sound. At the time, it wasn't that popular to do that. That's the Bonham microphone in a staircase famous sound of Led Zeppelin
Okay.
is this room. But the third way is the band plays together, but they're playing to a click track.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing. I want to have really good editing capabilities. And like I said, it's hard to edit best verses, best this, best that. If you're not playing to a click track, your drummer has to be amazingly consistent.
Well, it's not just your drummer. You know, if you as the bass player come in even like a half a moment too soon on a verse, then you can't interchange that verse with another one. So it's
also very difficult for other musicians to come in afterwards and play along. It's easier when there's that click.
Yeah, if you want to overdub or layer like a bunch of things. Okay.
And so what we're doing with this album is kind of version number 3, where we are in the same room together, but our focus is just getting drum sounds. And we're just direct recording. Guitars are going direct. The singer is singing in the room, but they're separated enough and the drums aren't going to pick up that voice. But there's no guitar amps being played. Everything's just going direct in the computer as a reference.
Okay.
And we're basically shooting to get drum sounds, and we're playing to a click track. But we're playing together so that the drummer has the feel of the band still.
And a reference to the song, too, because otherwise, I can only imagine that memorizing an entire song and then being told to play it without the song is not easy by any stretch.
It depends on the musician. It really comes down to then how experienced the musician is, because that's really number 4. Pretty much how I learned to record is I record a guitar and vocal track to a click track, and then I have a drummer record to my guide track. But there's no interaction between us, and the dynamics just aren't there.
So it's layered, but
you're doing something else for dynamics. Right.
Okay.
So you're like you're talking about, you're layering. Most of your pop music today is like this, or hip hop, where it's a beat and somebody builds. They start with a beat. They add some, it could be loops, keyboards, whatever. They build a backing track and then they do whatever they do over the top of it. But what they're utilizing is the instruments and the voices and whatever to build energy, because you can't fluctuate the timing. I mean, you can nowadays, but you typically don't. Like a great example of this would be Prince doing all of his own music. So
sure, because he can't play more than one instrument at the same. I mean, I guess he could try, but he's going to layer stuff.
He would go in and crank out a recording in a night. There's a great story of where he came down to give one of his songs to, I don't know if it was the Bangles or whoever it was, but it was somebody who was down in LA. And this is where he finally found the studio, the sound that he wanted. And these people were in the A room, and he goes, maybe I don't want to give you this song. Hey, can I go into the B room and work this out? 3 hours later, he comes back and the song Kiss is finished. And now one interesting thing about the song Kiss is there's no bass on it at all. It's guitar, it's a Lindrum, and the record company was like, there's no bass on this. What are we going to do with this? And he says, you're going to put the fucker out. And they're like, this is dumb. This isn't going to work, right? And that studio B or whatever it was, ended up being the exact design. So when he built Paisley Park, he's like, got someone to go down there and get all the specs from that studio and basically built those at Paisley because he loved how it sounded. He knew how it worked. But that's the kind of example where somebody just layers things together. It's all with a drum machine. Sure, you can add some, a little bit of swing in this or that, but you're using the elements of the music to create the vibe and the energy, because you're not playing live. You're not doing it together. You're not going to have dynamics like that. And so we're trying to do a hybrid version of this. And one of the examples, and this is getting back to this idea of here we are writing songs in the middle of recording, which is a dumb idea, but we can do this because we're playing to a click track. Our goal is to get just good drums. And one of the ways we're doing this is we recorded all day Saturday. We got 4 songs done. We did a demo of this one song, and I just said, this is bad. We can do better than this. And this is the part where I'm learning to be a producer, is say, no, I'd rather not do this song, or we do it better.
Before we move further, let me ask, how much freedom, or was it overwhelming the first time you went digital?
I started with a computer, so I have none of those hang-ups that other recording engineers have with tape, with faders, with having this hands-on approach. Mine has all been about a mouse and a keyboard, always.
So how does all of this inform what you're working on right now?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you want people to, when it's released, buy the disc. But when you're actually in post, does all this information, does it have an impact?
You asked me about all that information, all that studying and everything that I've learned over the last 10 years and how it's coming into play now. And how it's come into play is a few months ago, I knew that we were going to be playing above a garage in a room that had absolutely no treatments on the walls whatsoever. It's a tiny room. It's going to have echoes that are not pleasant. So we need to make it dead. But you need to make it dead, or if you can make something too dead, which is an anechoic chamber, where literally you could hear the sound of your own hearing. The one thing that I don't want what makes a great recording studio great is the room itself. You get to hear the room. That's why Bruce Springsteen pushed up those faders, because he loved the sound of that big room. Okay, I don't get to do that. I've recorded in a huge warehouse before, and it sounded fantastic. I've also recorded in very dead spaces, and it sounded horrible, or it's also sounded fantastic. And that comes down to the musician, the instrument, how you capture it, all of these things play into it. I had to do really bad and really good. I had to have really bad examples and really good examples to learn. Okay, it wasn't just me. It was this kick drum that this drummer has was garbage. It had nothing to do with me. And one of the things about, like when you and I are talking, and if we're hearing an echo, because let's say we're sitting too close to a wall, you can throw some foam up on that wall, any old foam. It's going to get rid of that echo. It's going to get rid of that bounce because it's going to absorb it, because the voice is at a certain frequency. It's very easy to tame that. Music, and especially a drum set, has very low frequencies. And if you coat everything, the whole thing like, put carpet on the walls, by the way, the whole egg crate thing, total bullshit. It does nothing. But let's say you put carpet on the walls and floor ceiling or foam. All you've done is you've dealt with the upper frequencies. You've done nothing to deal with the low frequencies. And you end up with what's called a boom room, where you don't have a lot of high frequencies, but the low frequencies are going crazy. And I had to compromise here because I wasn't going to drag my mixing room. I have the audio treatments to tame the low frequencies up to the high frequencies. I wasn't going to bring all the stuff to the studio. So I started building some stuff, and I compromised in a way where I was going to make it better, but I wasn't going to make it perfect. And then it came down to, like, for example, the kick drum. They brought the kick drum in, he hit it, and it was like huge. It was booming, ginormous. And I'm like, oof, Lord. Like, when I put a microphone on the other side of the room, like in the stairway, all you heard was this kick drum. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to pick a microphone that grabs low frequencies. I'm going to grab a microphone that grabs higher frequencies.
So you don't have to necessarily, you're using the proper tool instead of rearranging the entire room necessarily.
Yes, there's ways that you can get away with this. One of the things is, this was a really big thing for me. I don't do a lot of mixing, so we're going to probably have somebody else in the Valley that's got really good ears do the mixing. We actually reached out to him. It was suggested that I reach out to him and send what we're recording to him and get his opinion about it. That's like a man asking for directions. But I've had growth in my life, and I didn't have a problem saying, hey, Chip, what are you hearing? This is what I'm hearing. I would like your opinion. It was a very adulting thing for me to do. And it was great because the feedback, what his suggestions were, was amazing. It was what I was hearing too. So I'm like, awesome. One of the things that happens is, this is another kind of fun thing when you listen to a recording. Listen to how the drums are. oftentimes the drum, especially with alternative music or like folk music, not your really polished country or rock, you'll hear in like a lot of alternative music, the drums are just right up in the middle. Everything's in the middle. When you hear them banging the toms or banging the cymbals, it's not like Neil Peart and Rush where the toms go from left to right, right? They're all right in the middle. And that could be done for various reasons. It could be done for taste, but it also can be done because you're in a tiny room and you stick up, you don't have...
I don't have room for 15 toms.
And you don't have room for putting microphones 35 feet away at the ceiling so Bruce Springsteen can come over and lift up those two faders and it sounds like an amazing image. All the sounds bouncing around the walls and it just is all smeared and weird sounding. And so that was our focus here was, here's a great example. Exile on Main Street, Rolling Stones.
Yep.
The drums were recorded with 3 microphones. It's called the Glenn Johns method. Glenn Johns came up with this way of putting 3 microphones on a drum set and making it work. There's a million different drummers that have recorded with the Glenn Johns method. They sound amazing. Now, granted, he's using great microphones. They got great drum set. And here's the great thing about that. Let's say the drummer comes back and says, well, man, that cymbal, all I hear is that cymbal. Well, hit the cymbal less hard, dummy.
It's on the player. That's at that point.
You need to play balanced. 3 mics are great if you can play balanced. If you've got too heavy a foot, too heavy a hand, something like that, that's, a lot of drummers have gotten used to where there's a mic on every single instrument. And so they can go in and mix it all. But back then, they didn't have all those tracks like we do today with digital world. So they were limited. So like, for example, I was like, let's try a modified Glenn Johns method. So I stuck up the 3 mics. I did some other mics around it. I recorded it. I sent it to Chip and Chip said, yeah, that's not going to work. You need to just do close miking everything. And I was like, yeah, I'm with you on that. And I was hearing this big boom on the snare and Jason brought in a different snare. And like I said, with kick drum, I tried this mic, I tried another mic, and we did this is not what I wanted to do, but I had one night to mic up the drum set and listen to what it sounded like and make the changes. The next time we got together, I was recording. Not ideal, but I'm getting the best drum sound I have ever recorded.
What's the rest of the process like then? You're going to get the drums down. So as an example, from what I understand of the intro to this show and the outro, that was all you, right?
So that's a drum loop.
Yep.
That's me typically with this is actually kind of fun. The intro for this show is something I recorded on my 4-track in 1998. And at some point before I got rid of my 4-track, I made it digital. And, and I've told you this, but now the audience knows. When you came to me and I said, well, what are you hearing? And you sent me some.
Yeah, I sent you a playlist of like 5
tracks.
Yeah.
I got to the second song and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what this is. And so I went into my computer and I hunted this thing down, which was not easy because my method of cataloging was not really all that clear. I eventually found it and then I re-recorded it. And what I did is I found a drum loop that was close to the tempo and I then played along with that drum loop. I recorded all the guitar parts and then, I recorded bass and then I went through and I massaged the drum loops by just basically cut, paste, this and that, tweak a little here and there. What we're doing now is we have an actual drummer and he can play to a click, which is crucial. Like I said, we're all in the same room playing together. There's, the mic bleed stuff isn't an issue. And when we're doing about 3 full takes of a song, maybe a half take or a section, and then the drummer and I will go through and we will pick the best parts that we like and piece them together. Then we're going to do exactly what I did for your intro, but instead of playing to a drum loop, we're going to be playing to actual drums. Whether we do it together, alone, but then we'll be having actual mics on guitars, that kind of thing. The vocals will be done. And that's, we call that tracking, because you're literally going track by track by track by track. You don't have the same feel as a live recording because you're not all in the same room together. But the thing for me is that the drummer, even though we're playing to a click track, the drummer is hearing the way the songs are always performed So he changes his dynamics based on how he feels the song. And it's worked. It's worked phenomenally because he had we have one song where I knew that we had to have both guitar players playing because of the energy of the song. And you could feel it. He did this one take where I was like, that's it, we're done. Like I knew that was the take. There was no question about it. We even tried one more take and I'm like, nope, nothing's gonna. He felt it. He went for it. He beat the crap out of those drums in a few spots. It was awesome, right? Now, the couple songs that we're rearranging right now, they're more instrumentals. They don't have that same kind of interaction. They have dynamics, but because they're instrumentals, there's none of that. There's not the mood that you get from, a vocal line or a harmony or something that inspires you. They're a little more, we have elements of, like prog rock in there. We have elements of, like odd times and things like that because it's an instrumental. This one is going to be, it's not as crucial. And as a matter of fact, I went into the studio the last 2 nights to record guide tracks for the drummer, just in case we can't pull this off by Saturday. Because like last night, the singer, like I'm one of those, I've never been a great musician. I'm not super talented, but I've got these weird qualities that really come in handy. And one of them is just being able to memorize something and remember the patterns. And so I'm really good at that. It's what makes it possible for me to like double track vocals, double track guitar parts, because I just remember what I did the first time and I can duplicate it. I know singers that literally cannot come in and duplicate the line that they just sang before, but they're super talented. And so that's kind of like one of my little toolbox things is by Saturday, I will know these songs and our singer won't, but it's okay because he doesn't have to.
It sounds to me like you've turned a corner somewhere. And while you have all of the technical down, like this is producer Henno, because like your ear, your mastery of the process and the ability to drive the bus where it needs to go. Like it just sounds like after having done this for yourself for so long, it's time for you to lead with everything you know now.
Yeah. And that's the fun part about this project for me has been, yes, I'm the recording engineer, but I'm not the recording engineer I was 5-6 years ago when I had a studio and I was so concerned about what it was going to sound like. I'm actually having a lot of fun. When I found out that I had 1 day to demo drums and then the next setup, that was that, right? I was okay with it. I walked in and I said, we're going to have fun. Hopefully there's nothing really horrible that happens, but everything can be worked. And, this is the sound of this room. This is the sound that we're getting, and we're just going to work with it. And I'm not going to get obsessed about it. I'm not going to say, and it just so happens that, I looked at Jason, and Jason he's an amazing musician. He writes songs. His family is, musical. He's played in a lot of studios, and he told me, he said, Henno, this is honestly one of the best drum sounds I've ever had. And I'm like, you're just totally fucking with me, But every night that I go home and I do a quick mix on something to send to everybody, I'm not working that hard. It's actually easy. And one of my big issues is I have a hard time with low frequencies and how much to put in because I happen to love metal. And when I get in my car or on my headphones, I do a lot of bass. That's not a good way to make yourself a good mixing engineer. And so I have a really hard time with low end. And what happens is that, it might all of a sudden not sound so good on a tiny little system or on your phone. And I came home and I'm like, everything's translating. It's awesome. This is great. And it allowed me to just say, cool, we're going to have some fun. And have we had issues? Yes, we have. There was the first song we played was kind of mellow. The second song was a lot louder and the level started getting pushed. But you know what? I can fix that. That's not a problem. The fun part has been the production aspects of it. And this is where what I wanted to bring to this session was the knowledge that I've learned by listening to podcasts and reading magazines and recording stuff about how things were recorded is to learn from the best and how they got their best work. Sure, I wanted 30 days of rehearsing these songs. That's not going to happen when your bandmates all have jobs, they have families, they have other bands they play in. We can get together maybe once a week. If we're lucky, if schedules permit. That wasn't going to happen. All right, so we're going to do our best. And then I'm going to come in and think about the things that a lot of people don't think about, which is, are we all hitting this chord at the same time? You know, I listened to the demo that Doghouse did before, and it was interesting because their bass player is actually a music teacher, and he left the band because he got a job with the Boise Philharmonic Orchestra. This guy plays stand-up bass, you name a bass. He plays in orchestras, he plays double bass. He is an amazing bass player. I listened to the recording and I was like, it's not, and this is not a knock on him. It's the band themselves. They're not playing together. One guy's playing his part, the other's playing their part, but nobody ever sat down and had a conversation that, are we playing something that's complementary or not? And I could hear it. I was here, like, okay, that guy's hitting, that particular note on an upbeat while the other guy's hitting it on a downbeat. That's not tight. That makes something not feel tight. It feels kind of loose. And so that's where I was like, this is where I'm going to make my difference with this, is bring in those little bits. Like, I focus on timing. I focus on tempos. I focus on how we're going from one section of a song to another section of a song. And sometimes I bring stuff up and I get this look back at me like, I'm speaking a foreign language, which is fine. That means this is a great opportunity for all of us to learn something.
Yep.
And what I love about this group of guys is our primary, I call him, he's our team captain. He's our lead singer. He's the guy that, whose house we play at. He's a doctor, has his own practice. We're talking type A. To go through medical school and all that, to start your own practice, you have to have the right personality for that. The guitar player, who incidentally is an amazing, he's a better bass player than I will ever be, but he plays guitar too. He doesn't have perfect pitch, but he pretty much has that ability to like hear something once and then just play it.
Okay.
It really irritates the crap out of me, but I also love it because it makes learning stuff so easy. I'm like, Brian, how do I play this? He is a dentist who owns his own business, and it's a big operation. I happen to go to him. And it's also very nice to know that all of my Invisaligns and everything went to guitars and amplifiers. But those guys come into the studio and they leave that stuff behind.
Yeah, it's fun. It's something
it's
that
amazing
they can do to unwind. And I feel like you probably get more out of them than if they were doing this for money, because it's refreshing to them.
Like, I listen to them. Because they both own their own businesses, they will be discussing what any business owner goes through. And I just go, wow, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that in our band setting. And, I feel appreciated for the time that I put in to building all these sound treatments and the extra hours. And, at one point, Tom was like, I want to pay you. And it's another one of those things where instantly I just go, money. I don't want to talk about it, because I do this because I love to do it. It's the same reason that I love to write jingles and songs and stuff for podcasts and spots. It's something I enjoy doing. I have a day job. It pays my bills. It's something I also love to do. But the idea of talking about money when it comes to my passion makes me want to run out the door. But I went, they want to express their appreciation. And so I didn't start saying, well, I'm going to charge you X amount an hour, blah, blah, blah. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to track my time. And I said, how's that sound? How about we just start with that? I'm going to track all my time that I put into this, and we could talk about it when it's done. And they're just like, that sounds good. I'm like, okay. And I'm going to get paid for this. And it'll be the first time I actually probably make some real money recording, which is awesome.
It's about time. Like, I say that as someone like, I mean, obviously this is, this podcast is a passion project for me, And it's hard to bring money into passion projects. And I know that sounds odd because, a lot of us would like to do these things for full time, but money, A, changes things, and B, it is that, well, yeah, I'm not making anything, but I also don't have to think about it either. And that's a relief for some of us.
It is. Well, because guess what? If I'm not getting paid, I'm not putting that pressure on myself for this fucking kick drum to sound right. Like I can't let you down. I'm doing it for free. Well, let me give you an example. Most of the intros that I've done for podcasts, even though it might take me a long time to finally come up with the idea, because it's usually something that some of them just instantly make sense to me right away. It's boom, divine inspiration, just boom, it comes together. But sometimes I have to let it marinate for a while. I have to think of, something that just grabs me. There's an idea, a melody. But I've gotten to the point now where once I have the inspiration, when I sit down at my desk, grab the guitar, grab the bass, grab the loops, whatever it is, record everything, and we're talking 30 seconds to about a minute of material.
Yep.
The next morning, waking up and making any tweaks, mixing it, it typically takes me, I've got it down to about 5 hours of work, of legit work, about 3 hours at night to record all the tracks, and about 2 hours the next day to mix it, listen to it on my headphones, make some changes, go out to the car, listen to it on the car, make some changes, then send it off, right? If I charged $50 an hour, that's $250. Would you pay $250 for a 30 to 1 minute intro for your podcast?
I mean, I think
when you don't make any money on your podcast?
I mean, that's the key. I think I would if I could, one of those things. But
no, you go onto Fiverr and you see who's going to give you something for $5.
That's true.
From Ukraine.
I do want to ask though, of the 3 hours recording and the 2 hours tweaking is what I'll call it, because it's a lot of different things, right? Which do you enjoy more?
I probably enjoy the recording more than the mixing, which is why this album will end up being mixed by somebody else.
Okay.
But most of that is because of my own inferiority complex on it, or just my insecurities about other people listening to it. And then it's funny to feel like someone's going to judge me based on how it sounds. But the difference here is with this album and with the things I do for podcasts and with my own stuff, nobody's going to compare it. That's why when it comes back down to around the idea of mastering and loudness levels and all that kind of stuff, we're going to put the stuff up for streaming and a CD's going to be made and all that, but it's not like it's going to be listened to side by side with other recordings where we have to compete.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the podcast. Podcast intro doesn't compete with anything. You don't listen to it side by side to something else and go, oh, well, the quality of that, I don't like that. So it makes it a lot easier. It's a lot less stress. It's my own hang up. And based on how things are sounding already, I might actually end up doing mixing on this. We'll see. I'm not sure at this point. I'm amazed at how, I've already said, drums scare the crap out of me, and these aren't scaring the crap out of me, and the drummer's happy. So I'm like, well, shit, because guitars are easy for me. I can mix guitars all day long. Vocals are a good singer I can mix. I'll tell you, the hardest thing for me is the stuff where I've sang over.
Well, we're always our own worst critics, but it's got to be easier to deal with mixing your own riffs than to mixing your own voice.
At least I've gotten over it now, where it's like, that's one good thing about podcasting. It's like you get over that aversion to your voice real quick.
One episode. That's all it takes. If you're really going to edit for whatever reason, and you have to listen back to raw audio, you get over it real quick, because if you can't listen back to your own voice, it's over.
And the thing for me is, I have a very bland voice when it comes to singing. I've always been good at doing harmonies and that kind of stuff. I've never been a lead singer. I've got some moments. You know what it is my voice is like every time that you've had there's a band that you loved and the guitar player decided to put out a solo album, and you're like, yeah, the music's good, but singing's not the same. It's lead singers have, Everything that you've ever heard about where a lead singer gets into trouble or says something stupid or gets arrested or blah, 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 or, all those things, that's what makes a great lead singer a great lead singer. It's they walk in with that attitude. And, the backup guy who decides to put out his own album, I mean, sure, sometimes it's amazing, but for the most part, there's a reason they were the backup guy, You bring in that talent. So like for myself, like Tom, our singer in Doghouse, he's got this really neat way of his inflection is cool, and he does things with his voice. And like I put a microphone up on him and it sounds amazing. And then I sing into it and I go, God, what is wrong with this microphone? So that's, bringing this back to one of the questions from the beginning was about like gear and stuff like that. Like it took me so long to realize that, again, it ain't the equipment. It's the person that's in front of it. It's the making sure you didn't do anything dumb, like have the person standing in a corner where they're, the sound's bouncing off the walls. The thing that we always hear about with podcasts is like, oh, just grab any microphone and, do it. Well, that's bullshit. Get a decent fucking microphone, right? If your room sounds like it's an echo chamber, put some freaking curtains up or go onto eBay and get foam remnants and stick them on. There's things you can do. Quality, there's a basic level of quality. However, with that said, you don't have to spend all the money. And that's what I've learned.
Yeah.
I have spent all the money and got a shitty sound before. And with this recording that we're doing right now, I've got some great sounds happening, and it's not the most expensive stuff in the world.
So the last remaining vestiges of like stuff from my late 90s jaunt into audio engineering is I don't have any of the Porta Studios anymore. I have a few guitar amps still. I have one microphone from back then. One. Okay. And is it the greatest microphone? Absolutely not, but it works. It worked for me in college when I would sing at open mics and stuff. It's the $10 Radio Shack mic. I had a $50 Shure. And, at the time I could have told you the difference, but only one has stood the test of time and only one still works.
I'll tell you, there's recordings out there today that are being done on $20, $30 Radio Shack Boundary microphones because, so a Boundary microphone is like, imagine like a flat square and it's got a cord that goes into it and it uses a piezo. And what's amazing, you can stick it on a wall. Most times what they do is they just stick it inside of a drum set. They put it on the bottom of the drum set. And there's this one particular Radio Shack mic that when you set it up a certain way, gives you the most amazing sound for certain genres of music. And a lot of times what people will do is they will add trashy into the pristine to give it some character. And it's so like I almost went and bought one of these mics just because I wanted to. I'm like, okay, I got to find out what the deal is with this $30 Radio Shack mic, And the more I looked into it, it's like, yeah, just do. Here's the one little bit of advice that I think everyone should realize this for themselves. I'm never one of those people that'll say don't go out and make all the mistakes yourself. Is find some gear that makes you happy and then go do. And it took me a long time to get to that point where I'm no longer grass is greener. I did have a wish list and I've pretty much knocked off the wish list. I have certain bits of equipment that I wanted to have, that I've always wanted to have. And now that I have it, now it's time to do. It's no longer, and the same thing with my guitar stuff. I don't have the best, most amazing amplifiers in the world. I've got some really nice guitars, but when it comes to amps and stuff like that, I don't get really fired up about it. It does what I need it to do. So now I'm going to go do. And one of the biggest hangups, I think, and I already, touched on it already, is, the grass is always greener syndrome. Eventually you just need to, put boot to ass and, make your art happen, whatever it is, and do the best you can with what you got. And then be okay with that. Some of the greatest music out there has been done this way. If you get into the backstories for certain songs, you'll find out that some of your favorite recordings were done on some of the most basic, simple equipment, And you can do that too. And that's what I'm hoping to do that for myself now. I really, there's something happened when my dad passed, and I thought about, I had a little bit of an existential crisis. There was definitely no crisis, but let's just say as I was driving home, I was thinking about what I was going to do with the next couple, hopefully couple decades of my life. And one of the things that hit me is I'm going to do music. I'm going to keep doing music. It's the one thing that I love to do. If I won the lottery, I would build a studio and record bands for free all day long. I would love to do that. And I'm going to keep doing music, and I'm going to get a little less hung up on the equipment. Sure, am I going to try something out? Yeah, of course I will. Am I going to buy something new, check it out, see what I think about it? Yeah, I will. But it's time to do what I love to do and apply the parts of the process that are fun, like the production aspects, working with others. I'll tell you, we've had some happy accidents. Oh, I love happy accidents. That's why I love art. That's why I love playing with other people.
Sure.
That's why I love playing with this group of guys, is for those happy accidents. They happen at when I'm by myself, but not nearly as much as when I'm interacting, with others. That's when the little miracles happen and makes it all worthwhile. I'll ask you the question that I've had to ask myself and to get over it. It's like, what in your life is holding you back? What's stopping you from doing your creativity or your art, if at all, where you're thinking about doing it and you're not doing it?
So there's nothing stopping me from writing. And, one of the things I made sure of when I launched this podcast was that I would still have time and energy and like the mental resources to be able to continue writing. Because that was something I wasn't willing to give up even for a podcast. The podcast has kind of opened me up to, I can do this and it's another outlet and it's another medium. I keep thinking, and it's, I don't know, serendipitous, the universe talking to me, whatever. I've been thinking about what other mediums there are for me. There's nothing stopping me right now, right? I've got the blog and I'm happy with what I'm outputting there. I've got some people behind the scenes who keep telling me to write maybe more fiction or maybe get back into poetry. And I've started to think about it. I've started to jot down maybe a verse here or like the outline for a short story. And my platform of the blog has never been just about movies or just about this. So I have a platform where if I write a verse, I can put it there. If I write a poem, I can put it there. If I write a short story, I can put it there. And the podcast has been another additional wonderful outlet. I did a video relating to a short story using stills, but I used some movement in all the still photography to make it look like a video behind a narration that Dan Lizette did for me of that short story. One of my guiltiest pleasures, if you will, is I enjoy editing. I don't know, you and I have been recording for like an hour and 40 minutes as I talk right now. The time on the episode when it gets released will probably not be 140 minutes at this point. But I really enjoy that editing process. And when I did the one video that I've done, I really enjoyed that process too. I just don't know what that next step is. And it's probably beyond me. It's probably, hey, do you have a script? Hey, would you like to shoot this thing? Hey, whatever. That's probably where it's more than the blog and it's more than the podcast, where it's not something I can just do myself. But I do want to strive for more because it's a challenge. And it's kind of what you were talking about in terms of what do you want to do? There's nothing stopping me except that I know where my limitations are. So if I want to start doing more video, I can't do it on my own. But if I never went any further into video, I think what I've established for myself on the platform of the written word and the spoken word is definitely creatively fulfilling to a point where as long as I keep doing it, I'll be fulfilled.
In a lot of ways, the asking you this question is kind of a dumb question, because you are one of the few people that I know that you write, you do the writing, You do the writing because you want to do the writing. I've never heard you say that something is holding you back from writing. There's no insecurity about it. It's not other people's opinions. It's not how many people read it. You just write. You do it. It's one of the few things that most people don't even get around to. They want to write the book, but they're not willing to write something just every day. And you're one of the few people that does that that's your art, is that writing. And now you've taken it to the podcasting too. It took a while, but you're doing it. But there wasn't a hang up in that regard. It wasn't like, oh, well, when I get this or when I do this, then I'll make it happen. It was just a matter of, when it felt right, you were going to do it. And I think one of the reasons I asked this is there some other, is that next step? You have already done more than most people ever do when it comes to something that's enjoyable, that is like a passion. Most people just stay in the I wish stage. They never just put the pencil down to paper for the sake of doing it. So as a person that has done it, that's what I was curious about. It's like, is there a book? Is there something in your future?
Yeah, there could be. I think it all goes back to the podcast where everybody's like, when, and it wasn't until I had the idea, this is the format. This is what I want to talk about. This is who I want to talk to. This is how I want to do it. I'll say you're absolutely correct. Like, I know I could write a book. Do I know what that book's going to be? No idea. Right. Jason Zapata and I talked about adaptation and interpretation on this show, I think episode 9, but we also, I helped edit his first book of poetry that we self-published and is available on Amazon. And we're currently in the process of working on his second book of poetry. And I've already done one pass through editing his novel. I think one of the things that holds me back, but also sets me free, is I'm also comfortable being the assistant. I'm comfortable being the producer. If I'm just an editor for Jason Zapata, I don't see that as I'm just an editor. No, it's his words, absolutely, but I get to help. And that's a huge thing. When you talk about wanting to open up a studio and help record bands for free, look, if money were no object, I would just help produce podcasts. I would just work with people because it's enjoyable. I enjoy the process in a way similar to you that other people are like, ugh, oh, I just want to write it. I don't want to edit it. I just want to record it. I don't want to mix it. That process is just as fun. It's one of those things that keeps me going. It's why when people talk about, we talked about it up in terms of recording, like anybody can grab a mic. Yes, anybody can grab a mic, but just because you recorded for an hour doesn't mean you should release an hour, right? Like, do some editing.
So here's this is the fun part about that I know you and I just get a kick out of this all the time, which is, anybody can record. Have you tried fucking dealing with a podcast feed, an RSS feed with iTunes and Spotify? That's great. Anybody can record something. You know how fucking technical it is to get this shit out there?
I still second listen. The guilty thing for me is I release an episode every fortnight. And every time...
Oh my God, did you just use the word fortnight?
Technically it's every 2 weeks, but fortnight sounds better now. It gets me... No. One of the things about it is, though, that period of time, I put so much into making sure that my first one was right. I now compare every new release to the last one. All right. Did I get the title right? Is the description where it's supposed to be? Like, I feel like I've not learned a thing because, like, I put everything into the one and now I compare it all to the one. But there is so much more. It's not just hit record, release.
Yeah. But the art part of it is the voice captured. It's the pencil on the paper. That's the part. And there's typically a lot of walking before you get to the point where you're going to have some success or you're going to feel comfortable or confident or whatever it is. But it's that walking that's worth it. And the one thing that I've admired about you is when you would tell me your schedule of your blogs for like the next X amount of months, there was work that you were ready to do. And it sounds like you take that and apply it to the other aspects of your passions.
I do. And so I get occasionally criticized because I treat Agent Palmer, the brand, as professional. It's fun, don't get me wrong, but I treat it like it's a job because I want to be taken seriously. And the only way I can be taken seriously is if I take it seriously. What if I just threw something together, here's 30 words, I need to get a post out this week. No, that's not fulfilling to me. I don't want to lie to myself first and foremost. So you have to do the work. Like I feel like you have to do the work and
act as if. That's what it's like. Act as if.
Yep.
As if you are getting paid for this. That's one of the things that my greatest challenges with anything that I do in my passion projects, like whether it's getting better at bass or, playing more guitar, doing more, getting into song ideas that I haven't, completely sussed out, is I need to do that. I need to say, okay, on these nights, I'm going to go do my job.
Yeah.
That's going to help me a lot. It's going to help me if it's just my hobby and my pastime. Well, guess what? It's the quality level and the accomplishment level is going to be a hobby or a pastime. But if I want to make it where I hope and dream it's going to go to, it's only going to happen if I do it like you're talking about, which is like treat it like a job.
There's a discipline level that I'm comfortable with, but I cultivated it. It would be a lie to tell you like, oh no, I started the blog and that's just the way it was. No, it took me a while to get comfortable with it. The only benefit I had when I launched the podcast was I knew what it took to do the blog, so I can apply it to more than one thing. But this didn't happen overnight, and it's fulfilling. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing for me. It would be great if 100,000 people listened to this episode. It would be great if 50 people tweeted me about this. But if 2 people listen, as long as I think I put out a good product, no, that's good enough for me.
Yeah. I was talking to Jason, our drummer, one night, and I was telling him about my kind of epiphany on, I'm going to play music. I'm just going to play music because it's something I love to do. And he looked at me and he said, I needed to hear that because for years and years, I keep saying, I'm going to do this until, and I gave and I did that in my 20s. If I'm not a rock star by the time I'm 25, then I'm done. And we've all done this. If my podcast doesn't reach so many listeners by so-and-so, I'm done, or blah, blah. And that's what Jason said he was doing. He's like, if I'm not making a certain amount of money at music, then I'm done. And what he just told me is like, it's what I needed to hear is I'm just going to keep doing it. Let go of all that stuff. And it was the greatest affirmation that I wasn't alone, in that. Follow your passion regardless of outcome, enjoy the journey, have a great time. It's what I see you doing. I love it.
I don't think there's any other way to deal with a passion project. I do not understand. Look, everybody works differently, right? So I'm not going to get on people, but I'll admit I'm a snob when it comes to this. But I turned my nose down at the writing November thing challenge people do because most of those people don't write the other 11 months of the year.
Exactly.
And it's not that I don't think a prompt and a community for 1 month is a bad thing. But if you do it 1 month and the other 11 you don't, then why even bother doing it for that 1 month?
Yeah, I'm the same way with like my workouts. I've decided that I'm going to do a workout that I know I can do for the next 20 years, and it's not a monthly challenge. It's not a 2-week challenge. It's not a 1 week. I can't sustain that stuff for the rest of my life. It's a wonderful booster. It's a wonderful get back into it kind of a thing sometimes, or set a little goal for yourself. I don't need to push myself to the next limit. I want to be able to do something that's sustainable, whether it's, an eating plan, an exercise plan, a passion project, something like that. There's been too much, I've already touched on it with you. The grass is always greener, and the all or nothing attitude has got me nothing. I mean, it really has. It's amazing how there's a reason that I have been playing with the same musicians now and for long periods of time over the last 10 years is because I started to appreciate the journey and quit and get out of these outcomes. I kept trying to control the outcome. What did it get me? It got me a lot of outcomes, but none of them were great, and now I get to have the wonderful, and I get to make up for all those wrongs. That's how I look at it. So
yeah, that's
my ego got me into so many bands, I was in all these bands. No, I was kicked out of a lot of bands.
Well, I think it also goes back to if you don't enjoy the process, you're not going to get any fulfillment out of the end result anyway.
That's
like,
true.
You know what? I don't care how good you are. If you don't enjoy the process, it's one of the things where athletes who enjoy the off season are usually the ones who last the longest in whatever their respective sport is. Because if you don't enjoy putting the time in, then you're resenting putting the time in. And that's no way to go.
Or is it all about just the results? Is it all about how you look? Is it all because God damn, some of those people put in
I don't think it can be all about results because it goes back to like my schedule, right?
Yeah,
like
how could you be?
There's been a bunch of people on this show that I've talked to before this show was a thing that I shared my schedule with, and they're like, well, what the? But everybody looks at what I accomplish. Well, I don't accomplish that without the schedule and without the discipline to come home from an 8-hour day when I had a job and still work or record or whatever. You have to put in the time. It's just, that's the difference, right? I can only keep putting in the time because I enjoy the process.
Yeah. Otherwise you wouldn't be. If at any point it became a burden, you wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly.
Is basically it. It's true. Yeah. If it was ever a struggle.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it is. It's writing. Well, it's not always, flowing like a river, but you get through it. And I also know that there are going to be good times and bad times. So
see, that's the thing. I think this is what it's about is like you're doing one of the things that what I like to view or how I like to approach things too is to not, realize that there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be productive times, there's going to be not productive times. There's going to be days you don't want to be doing it. There's going to be days that you're going to be wanting to do it, but you just keep doing it.
Yep.
You just keep doing it because something about it made you love doing it. It's the one thing where I just let myself down when I was younger is I didn't realize that it's worth putting in the time. It's worth getting through the hard parts. It's worth the frustration. Like right now I'll catch myself, like we're trying to get gigs booked for the summer. And there's certain band members that don't respond in time. And then Tom loses the opportunity to have a gig. And my first reaction is like, well, fuck these guys, and I'm like, oh, well, yeah. So-and-so's got 2 kids. The other guy's got 3 kids, and he runs a business too. And he plays in 2 other bands. It's like, how about accepting the fact that, well, that's just the way it is and enjoy it, what you got.
Yeah.
Because the younger me would have been like, this ain't worth it. They're not putting in the hours, that kind of bullshit. And it's so nice to just let go of that. And that's why I get to keep doing it every week is because I've learned to like let go of that bullshit that's so easy to get caught up in.
I'll admit I pulled back the curtain on this episode by telling those of you astute enough to do the quick math that I edited about 40 minutes out of this episode. It was about remastering and music formats, really technical stuff, which I found interesting, but not as interesting as the personal turn the episode took towards the end. That was what I felt was the better story to share. I am, after all, the host, producer, and editor, so those are the kind of decisions I'm allowed to make. I'm sure if you reach out to Henno, he'll regale you with tales of remastered music and formats aplenty. All you have to do is ask. But the reason that had to go was because of the conversation that dovetailed into passion projects. Henno literally flattered me, though I think I was more flattered listening back during the edit than during the recording. I am a professional after all. Because I am doing all of this Palmer stuff for myself. I don't mind that I don't get much recognition, but also I don't get much recognition. So it's not often I'm aware that people notice the totality of the work that I do. But as has been a common theme during many of the episodes of this podcast, you have to put in the work. Great pieces of art require work. It's artwork. A podcast requires work. An album, a book, a blog, a career change. Whatever it is you want to do, go and do it, but you have to put in the work. I applaud Henno for understanding and breaking through paralysis by analysis. I, myself, have suffered from that at times, and I know many other friends who are similarly afflicted. But when you get through it and the thing gets done, that's an amazing feeling. It's a feeling that if you are listening to this right now, I wish for you to have. So stop fretting and go do. You'll make mistakes, you'll learn, you'll get better. But most importantly, you'll be doing. Not thinking about doing, but actually doing. And so long as you enjoy the process, the journey, then the end result will be fulfilling. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 14. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join in the discussion. You can tweet the podcast at The Palmer Files, myself at Agent Palmer, and reach this week's guest Henno at Ida Henno. You can hear him on the Moving the Needle and Crazy Life podcast wherever you are listening to this, and don't forget you can see all of my writings on agentpalmer.com. The show email is thepalmerfiles@gmail.com if you want to share with me what you're working on, or if you have any feedback on a previous episode, or if there's a topic or guest you'd like me to consider. You can also hear more of me in the meantime on Our Liner Notes, a musical conversation podcast with host Chris Maier, and my other gig as co-host of the Podcast Digest with Dan Lizette.
Yeah, when are you going to get rid of the pink curtains?
Okay, so when Steph moved in, she said she was going to get rid of them, and she's been here for over a year now, and they're still here.